Hello and welcome to my video. Please do subscribe if you aren't already. So recently I have been getting quite a few questions and comments and requests related to the sorts of additional things I do to fix my paintings and my work in sketchbooks and so on. And oftentimes I've shown it quite briefly. And I thought what I would do today is to share with you all the different things I use that are in addition to the paint and the pencils and pastels and charcoal and everything else that I use. So those things that I use to fix the materials, either in sketchbooks or on paintings. So I'm going to cover a range of different things, hopefully to give you a bit of an overview of how the process goes and what you need to do to avoid kind of disaster, really. And quite a lot of this is from personal experience or from, just sort of knowing certain things. So I thought today I would share that with you. So I'm going to get going. I'm going to put the camera over the bench so that you can, my workbench, so that you can see the different things I use. And I'll explain a little bit about how I use them and when I use them. And I'm going to include varnish in that as well. Okay. So these are the assortment of fixatives and other things that I use in my paintings and drawings that are not the paint and are not the other materials like pastels and pencils and things. I've got those types of things on the table here just so that I can be clear about when I use these various fixatives. So if I start on this side then, so this the first thing I'd say is that I use a lot of things like charcoal and Inktense pencils and woodies and soft pastel, and a lot of those will smudge on paper or within paintings. And of course with paintings you're also adding liquid on top of them, so if you didn't fix them they would smudge and splay. And similarly in sketchbooks, as you know, if you've used charcoal and things on paper or sketchbooks, that they smudge, especially the willow charcoal, and so things need fixing. And so what I tend to use is, especially for things that are my paintings where I need them to retain their colour and not to yellow, I will use a professional fixative. And my favourite one, or the one I use the most, is this Winsor & Newton professional fixative. And it says protects drawings from smudging and dust. And so I tend to use that, spray it about 6 inches away to help me fix. And that's what is on here is the soft pastel, and that needs fixing. And you can see before it was fixed how there's some smudging going on. So that's what I tend to use if I want something that isn't going to yellow. If I'm doing something on paper or in sketchbooks and it's not as precious, then this type of thing, a cheap hairspray or a hairspray, and the cheaper the better in some respects, will fix in the same way, although there's a tendency for it to yellow over time. So I don't use that if I'm precious about what I'm spraying. And these are just the things that I fix with these fixatives: soft pastels, pencils, woodies, anything like that, and charcoal and pencil and so on. So that is those. And as I say, I use them for fixing drawings and on paintings. And that's all very well for the soft pastels. But what about when you're using oil pastels, things like these? And I tend to use Gallery, the Inscribe Gallery oil pastels in all sorts of colours. I use them in sketchbooks, and you'll know if you use them that they kind of smudge, and there comes a point when they smudge and go kind of muddy. Similarly in paintings, although some people talk about being able to just very carefully use a medium over them, I don't subscribe to that because I don't find that works very well. And there's too much of a risk of it smudging and smearing and making a mess in your paintings. So I use a oil pastel fixative. And this is the fixative I use generally, although I've used others, but this one is a Sennelier. and use it in the same way as I mentioned for the other fixative. You spray it on at about 6 inches away from it, and you let it dry. Once you make sure that you've covered what it is you're trying to fix, and then you let it dry, and then you work over. But what I would say is that I tend to use the oil pastels in the latter layers of the painting rather than using it all the way through, so I don't tend to use as much of this. So oftentimes I'm adding oil pastels in my sort of last couple of layers, and I'm often wanting those little jewel-like elements in the painting, and that's when I use them, and then I need to make sure I fix. Now, when I am working on my paintings specifically, there's something else that I do, and I tend to use gloss medium, and I tend to use the golden gloss medium quite a bit, and I use it when I'm mixing paint. I use it so that I can get to the consistency of paint I want, like a thick cream, not too thick, and I use this to mix rather than water because I don't want to dilute out the pigment. I also use it to stick the collage papers down. And the other thing I use it for is every few layers I will use it, because when you seal everything in using the gloss medium, it does really bring out the intensity of the colours and make them brighter and more vibrant. And the other thing is that when you are getting to a stage in the painting where you don't want to mess it up, if you seal everything in with the gloss medium and you work subsequently, once it's dry, if you work over it and it doesn't work out very well, you can wipe it off quite readily back to the sealed surface. So that can be quite handy. So that's what I use. I always use golden. I've tried others, but golden is my preference. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention, and I'll probably just move some of these out of the way so there's a bit more space. The other thing I wanted to mention is varnish. Now, because I end up by using the gloss medium, I end up with a very shiny surface. And that's good because it's given me that rich colour, but I don't necessarily want a finished shiny surface. So what I tend to use is a varnish, and the varnish that I'm using at the moment, that's now my preferred one, is a satin varnish from Winsor & Newton. And it's an anti-UV, so it protects the painting as well. And I just literally use a dedicated brush that I clean well each time and keep it very pristine actually, and use a particular container that I keep clean. And I use this varnish to enable me to I don't want a shiny painting at the end. I like the satin because it's neither matte nor shiny, it's somewhere in between. And so this is my preference. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this surface, but this is a surface that I've recently, I don't know if I show it to camera, you can probably see, but this is one that I have recently varnished, and, well, recently, it's not wet, and the great thing is, I don't know if you can see, but although it's retained a sort of a shininess to a point, it's a satin finish. It's not glossy anymore, but it's not completely flat matte either. And I do like that in between. And that's, you can use, this doesn't have to be brushed on, well it does in this format, but you can buy a spray form of varnish, which a lot of people use, but I don't tend to use it. I just prefer to brush it on. And the other thing that you can use instead is a wax, a cold wax, and that can be put on. But similarly to this varnish, that does need time to dry. And as I say, because I've got used to using this in the satin, that's what I use. Anyway, so I hope that's helpful. I hope that gives you an overview of what I do to fix things, rather than risking it all going to waste and being sort of messed up once the moisture goes on or once it smudges. Okay, well, thank you very much for watching, and please do subscribe if you aren't already. And as ever, I love your comments, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.